Welcome to this, our library saved evening, day 5, our environment clean and green. Just to remind everybody that we are monitoring messages and comments. We'd like you to be part of this evening, but please be respectful. All messages that go in the system may be displayed on screen. If you'd like to join us in the Zoom room in the studio audience, we'll post that link in the comments shortly. We want you to be a part of this. We're coming live from North Kensington. Thank you very much.
We are inviting you today to join us in celebrating the power of our community to organise.
And now that the council has made a commitment that the library will remain a public asset and a library, this is a living testimony to the truth that collectively we can and do make a huge difference.
Come and join the Friends of North Kensington Library to celebrate a new phase in this historic building's life.
As one of the first public-built libraries, this library has always represented the energy and commitment of communities, organising to secure their future through self-education.
However, in recent years, the commitment of councils to this principle has been weakened by successive governments.
We all know it took the awful events of Grenfell Tower to put an end to plans that would have handed our library over to private interests.
But our diverse community here in North Kensington has a long and proud history
of standing up and resisting the onslaught of developers.
When our friends of the library got together, the whole case looked absolutely hopeless.
And it continued to look hopeless for much of the campaign.
Still, we persisted.
Through the most difficult moments, when losing the library to private interests seemed like a fait accompli, the Friends of North Kensington Library came together.
We were endlessly supported by the many community groups and organisations that make up the network of self-supporting and community-led groups that have been so important to securing the future of public space in this area.
Even when they are in ways we cannot predict, could not hope for, or aren't able to perceive.
It's been a really...
Welcome everybody. It's wonderful to have you with us once again, here for our 5th talk in the series of 7 days, 7 talks, all around our spaces. This evening, we're going to be discussing the environment, clean and green. Shortly, we'll be handing over to Tayshan, your host for this evening, who will introduce you to 3 incredible local campaigners for our environment. But first, please join us in watching a short film to remind us of why we're here. Thank you very much. And now over to our host for this evening, Tayshan.
Thank you, Toby. It's a great pleasure to be here and taking part of this talk about something that is I'm so passionate about, our environment. And this talk is called Clean and Green. And yeah, I'm a bit about myself. I'm born and raised in North Kensington. I'd like to think myself of still a young man, but I've seen a few grey hairs appear recently, so I'm starting to question whether I can call myself young anymore. But yeah, I'm the founder of Grow to Know, which is a non-profit which is aimed at healing, inspiring, educating, and empowering community members through horticulture, especially young people. And as a young person myself, I know that there's so many barriers to getting involved in horticulture, and I think that's something that I'd love to break down. And I feel like our community could really do with a lot more green spaces, and also I think there's so many healing properties to gardens and nature that I think it should only be elevated and exhibited on the biggest platform. And I think I can really reflect on the way that gardening, horticulture, nature healed me in the aftermath, straight after Grenfell, and the way it impacted other community members, I think inspired me. It's something that I want to share now. So if I start by introducing Jonathan at Better Streets for Kensington and Chelsea. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi there. Thank you. So my name is Jonathan. Cool. Sorry, a bit of a delay. So my name is Jonathan. Like you, I've grown up in North Kensington, went to St Charles School, Carnival School, and have grown up around the area. As you say, I'm part of an organisation called Better Streets, and I'm really interested in how health and environment come together, and how do we make our streets better for people. Rather than me going through a long amble, there's a quick video that I've got and we can play just to give you an idea of what Better Streets is about.
It's been a really, really exciting 5 years. 22 kilometres of segregated cycle track installed, 40 modal filters introduced to stop our residential streets being used as bypasses or rat runs, 15 new pocket parks, 700 new trees. I mean, if someone had said 5 years ago the transformation that we would see in Waltham Forest, not just in our public realm and our highways, but across indices such as health, I would have said, really?
The fitness, the stamina aspect is one part of it, but I think there's also a real significant impact to people's well-being.
It's an investment in health long term for everybody.
The cycle hub, I think it's a really good idea, and it's really easy to use. It's changed massively the way I approach my commute.
Just to know that my bike isn't going to get stolen, that it's safe, locked away, that it's not in the hallway, kind of taking up room and upsetting my neighbour that I share the hallway with.
The better you make a local town centre or a shopping parade for pedestrians, for cyclists, then actually the footfall increases because people want to spend more time there. And that kind of positive impact around the public realm, encouraging people to stay, has to be good for our economy.
Generally, it just makes it quieter. It's a nice place for people with buggies to go up and down. In the summer, it's lovely because everyone sits outside the restaurants.
I think there's a lot more of a community feel that is happening, but I think that's a lot to do with also all the shops that have now kind of opened, like shops that were derelict and nothing was happening then before.
It's made a big difference to my being able to see a car journey and see how I could do that in less time with a bike.
Make people think twice about using a car. And certainly for myself, I now will either walk there, take the bus, or ride my bike.
On foot, in terms of the children using their scooters or their bikes, it's a lot safer.
Yeah, before it used to be quite stressful crossing the road, especially on the way to school. You can just walk across, there's hardly any traffic, there's hardly any cars, and it just feels so much safer on the way to school. Both of our schools at Mission Grove are right near the market and very busy roads. So we were very lucky last year to have some nice green spaces that we could actually get involved with the planting.
It was pretty botty before, so it was a kind of spot where it got quite dirty, there was fly tipping, it wasn't that safe.
We call it the pocket park. We just go around here and we like to go through the paths and just have a bit of fun on that.
Great. So I work in the NHS in East London, and that's a small example of what Better Streets is trying to achieve. And we think we can do better in West London and in Kensington and Chelsea. So we'd like to see more of that happening.
Definitely on the same page as you. I think, yeah, it's so impactful the work you've done, and I think there's so much more to do. Thank you, Jonathan. Marco, if we come over to you. Hi, Marco.
Hi, let me take myself off mute quickly. So yeah, hi, I'm Marco. I'm a planner working for Greater Cambridge. I'm also a public practice associate looking at digitisation of the planning system. But I'm a co-founder of London Car Free Day, and I founded a campaign a few years ago in North Kensington called Green Westway, which was about challenging the inevitability of a polluting infrastructure in our neighbourhood. And I worked with residents of Grenfell to do some community air pollution monitoring back in sort of 2013, I think. Firstly, I just wanted to quickly say thanks for the invitation. I'm genuinely happy to be speaking together with everyone on the panel. Constantine, who I've known since the Latimer mapping days, and whose recent sort of support for Wornington trees has been incredible to watch from afar. You don't know what you're going to miss until it's too late. And that's often the case. Taishan, I mean, I'm happy to meet you here today to see someone from the area doing some amazing initiatives in sort of greening the city. And Jonathan, as I told you before, I devour your tweets from the silence of my home. So just to say a few quick things. I remember the sort of basement or lower ground floor of the library being a kind of welcome day out from primary school. Maybe I learned how to read there, I don't know, I can't remember. But as a teenager, I sort of cheated on my first library love and used to go to the Kensington Library to sort of pretend to revise for exams with my friends. And it was only later in life that I reconnected to North Kensington Library with Eddie Daffon and realised what I was missing, somewhere that you could just walk into with no questions asked and connect with the world in your neighbourhood, print things, ask for information, find out about stuff, leave stuff for others to find out about, etc. And I think that the library kind of sits at the heart of a tension that we can see in a wider approach to the environment. And I'm saying this crudely, but I do think that there is a bit of a tension between kind of human scale and alienation, low tech and high tech, people and technocracy. And I think it's something that we've seen accelerate in the last year since COVID. So just to explain what I'm talking about quickly, and then as kind of provocation for the panel, but I don't want to take up too much time. I'll try and be as quick as possible. But in the low tech side of things, it's kind of represented by the library, because in the library, you know where you are. You can navigate the space using the alphabet and, thematic areas. And some cities, are trying to help you know where you are. And this has been accelerated since COVID. In Paris, the 15-minute city concept, which means that you can achieve everything you want within a 15-minute walk. They've introduced a planting permit to enable people to depave their streets and created a huge amount of cycle lanes. Similarly, in Milan has been accelerating kind of the conversion of parking spaces into squares to reclaim neighborhood squares from parking and for planting. And in Barcelona, the super blocks have been accelerated. Sweden's unveiled things called the 1 minute city, which means that people should be able to reclaim a parking space outside their front door. And so that's a kind of approach to the city that reflects the library. Whereas on the other side, when you come out of the library, during lockdown especially, you can kind of see that there are lots and increasingly growing numbers of Uber drivers and Deliveroo riders who don't know where they are. they're following GPS signals on their phone apps to get around. And it's what James Bridle calls computational thinking, which in its most extreme version is the Amazon warehouse, where there's a kind of chaotic management system that's created an environment that is completely illegible to the human, where machine learning, not the alphabet, determines where things are stored and navigated. And so to move around that space in the Amazon warehouse, you're mediated by an app. You don't know that a lawnmower and a detergent would be placed next to each other. It's a kind of dystopian vision, but it's also a real one, because, you know, Death by GIS has its own Wikipedia page that tracks all the people that have died following their sat nav down a ravine or, you know, into the desert. So just to bring it back finally to North Kensington, I think this sort of battle between low tech and high tech is probably reflected by my screen right now, this kind of pixelation. But, you know, there's a kind of technocratic I think that the high tech thing is about a technocratic understanding of what sustainability is, which equalizes inputs and outputs, and it quantifies kind of resources in a way that actually falsifies the need to impact the environment. And I think you can see that in local things that have happened recently. HS2 at Wormwood Scrubs, which has taken a load of land. Was there no way that HS2 could have found ways to include the infrastructure that they wanted in the huge infrastructure corridor that they have? Catalyst Housing and Wernington Trees, was there no way that they could find a way around the trees? The Kensington High Street cycle lane, I mean, why was that scrapped? All of these things, the Scrubs, Wernington Trees, and the Kensington High Street cycle lane, help humans navigate their environment and care about where they live, consequently. And so there's a tension where there's a kind of technocratic system that justifies these things being lost because there'll be gains made elsewhere with sustainability. But I think it's kind of dangerous. So my provocation or question is, how can we extend the kind of accessibility that we find in the library and the legibility of it outside to the whole of North Kensington and beyond?
I think you make some really important points there. And I think we really do need to go back to the drawing board, because there's a consistent theme of kind of being detached from our environment and detached from, you know, the very things, the fundamental things that keep us going and will impact our mental health. But yeah, we will touch on that. Thank you, Marco. Really appreciate it. Your insights. And Constantine, I hope I'm saying that right. Great to meet you, and yeah, welcome onto our talk. Do you want to give a bit of an intro about yourself?
Yeah, hi there. Yeah, it's great to meet you. Great to be here with all of you. I'm an artist. Well, I was actually born in Kensal Green. I went away, but I've spent most of my life here. I've worked in North Kensington for the last 10 years, and I pretty much started in 2010 by devising an art project which connects up with many of the themes which we're talking about this evening. I sort of mapped out two parts of the built environment in North Kensington. Our environment, actually, it's quite interesting to think about what environment means. We might want to just tease away at that because it has so many multiple meanings. I mean, there's the obvious things about it, but there's very personal things around it. But I was very interested in the Grand Union Canal and the Westway. They're two sort of built structures that divide across North Kensington. And I actually I wanted people to connect with those spaces. So I think part of this thing is getting people to move through space and time. We're sort of living a bit of a digital existence at the moment, but it's really important for us to be active, to connect up and to move in space and time. And this art project was getting people to travel across those areas and to actually make short films. And I curated a program of short films around these people's experiences of the Grand Union Canal and the Westway, and just thinking about them in new ways. Since then, I've pretty much worked on the estates in North Kensington as a community artist, and I've grown to really admire the green features in estates. First of all, in Silchester Estate, and then shortly after that in Lancaster West Estate in the Grenfell Tower. And I very much started as a sort of a documenting artist, but somebody who really began to connect with the residents, hear their stories, hear these voices of people, and not having sort of a platform to really register their concerns that were often ignored, tragically so, as we're sort of finding out, as we're going to obviously discover with Grenfell Tower, when residents were not listened to. And then I've moved from Silchester, Lancaster West, and I've moved in the last 2 years working on Mornington Green, first of all as part of a heritage project there that was documenting the estate. And it was pretty much a regeneration it was the first major regeneration in North Kensington that happened. And it's been going on for 10 years and it's halfway through. And I've sort of really got to just listen to the people. But when it was announced in November of last year that 42 trees were going to be cut down, I mean, it took my breath away, because this was really hearing that, it was just going through the motions of a regeneration. And it seemed to be all the tick box exercises being done by Catalyst. But from what I was hearing that it wasn't really meaningfully consulted. And this was an example of it. So one of the residents there, who was part of their steering group, when he sort of heard about this, he resigned from their steering group. And I just thought, what can we do? What can I do to help support residents? So immediate thing was to just go through usual channels and do a petition. Now, how do you do a petition in a lockdown? Well, we obviously had to sort of take our daily exercises and knock on doors and collect signatures. So that was the start of it. Started hearing what people were thinking. And we collected 150 signatures saying that they weren't happy with all these trees being cut down. Trees so vital for our health. I mean, they're our lungs, and they also are our livers, because they purify all the toxins around. So really important to sort of register that and take that petition to the town hall, and try to get some engagement going. To cut a long story short, we're sort of 3 months on. We've not even had a meeting yet with Catalyst. The council has made 2 recommendations for them to stop and consult on their regeneration. And they've actually now, in the last week or so, cut down 33 trees. And we've tried to stop that. People have taken their exercises. They've stood underneath the trees. They've tried to stop that. They've built fences around it. They've employed 24/7 security to keep the residents from protesting. It's led to some, obviously, and it's attracted the attention of wider activists around, who have now come down to help protect the trees, and we're so grateful for them. They're now coming down. We've had people go up in trees, also from the community, going up in trees to save those trees. And it's also triggered a legal writ. I think this is very unprecedented as well. Serena Morton, who runs the art gallery, came on board with our petition. You're seeing some images here about the devastating impact of losing so many trees in our environment. I mean, so Serena Morton came in and she had a contact with a lawyer, a huge lawyer, international firm, and they put together this nice writ, basically making a case about air pollution. And as we know, air pollution is a massive problem in London, in North Kensington in particular. So there's this has gone through, and I'm not sure whether it's triggered a change in Catalyst yet, but we've had a slight pause from the council. The council, it seems as though, slightly changing their tune, and they're listening a little bit to us. So as we stand, we still don't know what the situation is. We're waiting to come up with a green vision, because a lot of the community are coming together around this focal point, and hopefully they're going to present a plan. We're basically putting a green plan to plant a forest in North Kensington to make up for the devastating loss. We don't even know how many trees have been lost. It was Warnington Green. There could have been as many as 200 trees planted on that estate, and we know through the regeneration possibly 160 trees will be lost without any mitigation. So we're having this devastating thing taking place in North Kensington. It's something we need to campaign, fight against, join together, and support each other in our various strategies as we sort of campaign. So it'd be nice as well to connect up with the streets campaigns and Marco with the West Way, to think about how as a community we can all support each other and work our way to finding common strategies for trying to improve and take control of how our environment is being degraded. We really need to assert ourselves as individuals, as artists, and as residents. I mean, we're really being let down on a major level.
Thank you.
So that was more.
No. It was really interesting hearing from you and what you've been up to. I think this is an amazing platform, and where we're all in the same space now, and I think these conversations are extremely important to have. And I think off the back of this, there will definitely be kind of progress made as a collective And I think it's really important to unify, to get these messages across. Because I think, you know, all three of you are fighting amazing battles and doing things that are really positive for this community. And I think, yeah, the only way has to be forwards. And I think, you know, collectively, you're stronger. So yeah, thank you for your introductions, all three of you. And I think I'd love to open up the conversation by just asking, just putting out there, asking the question, why do you think that why do you think that, you know, the solutions are there? Let's not kid ourselves. There are solutions out there that are feasible, but why are we being ignored? Why are those solutions not being explored, and why are they not priorities, especially in our community, to the people that may make those decisions?
I'm happy. No, go for it, Jonathan.
Trying to manage the delay. So it's a really good question. So reflecting on the last 2 years, we've been we started off engaging with Kensington and Chelsea Council on cycle lanes, but cycle lanes aren't the solution to the environment. They're part of the solution. And as the film touched on, there's lots of things that are being done, and they've been done in East London, North London. They've been done in Amsterdam, Paris, New York, and elsewhere, and they've been proven. And so we've got documented examples of where these things have been done, where you can see them impacting people's lives and the way communities change. And you've also got the research that shows the health benefits and the environmental benefits, which requires a bit more digging in understanding. But when we bring it to the council and we want to have these ideas, first of all, there's no plan. So the council declared a climate emergency. One councillor said we're all David Attenborough when it comes to climate change in this borough. But David Attenborough doesn't just speak, he takes action. But we don't see the council taking action. And I don't know what the answer is, but we've got myself, Better Streets, we've got Constantine, Marco, people that are coming to the council with solutions and ideas and saying we can work with you and go into the community and kind of start the discussion. And I think Marco's right, we're being ignored. And one idea was to look at North Kensington and look at St Charles Square and how could we alleviate the traffic around the schools. And one councillor took that idea and completely distorted it so that it felt like the idea was put out there and it was going to fail because it didn't address the real issues of traffic on Barbie Road. And that was such a disappointment. And for me as a resident and as someone in the health service, I'm looking to my local authority to show leadership and work with us. And it's not there. And I'm asking myself, and I don't know why, but it's an important question.
It can be so frustrating, I think, and especially as a young person growing up in the area, I think the lack of green spaces, you don't really become aware to it until you get to a certain age, and the impact that nature could have on people in the community. And I do think that these things should be a priority, and even go as far as, and I think one of the most important things is to integrate it into the school curriculum. But that's another conversation. But I do think that it is very reactive. It's whenever there's a bit of noise made about it, or when I guess when it upsets people, then it's very reactive. Actually, we should be putting in green infrastructure and solutions in our community before it even gets to that. It shouldn't be, the pollution, the air pollution levels in our community are so high that it's going to impact our lives and impact our futures. That's why we're making a change. Actually, what we put in the first place, the infrastructure should be, it should work for all of us, I think. I think. Do either of you have any thoughts on this at all?
It certainly is. Sorry, Mark. Do you want to go, Marco? I was going to say, certainly as far as the sort of the trees are concerned, I mean, it's tied in with the regeneration, and the regeneration that started in 2010, and pretty much was imposed on the community at that time. It went through by one vote, Part of it is sort of, and we're coming in 9 years into it, and we're trying to change a master plan that was designed in 2010, which the council now oppose on two fronts: the environmental impacts, but also the fact that they're knocking down the estate, and they are building the same estate pretty much, but on top of it, they're building 50%, 500. So they're knocking down 500 units and they're building 1,000. So 500 units they're replacing social housing. They're building 500 flats for the market, which in North Kensington is £600,000 for a one-bedroom. And the council, I think, I just noticed, I caught one of the previous meetings when Kim Taylor-Smith was on. He's now saying that this is obviously wrong and wouldn't be passed. So there's obviously something fundamentally flawed with the planning system as such. It's never really engaged the community, and we come into it too late. So we're coming into it now and we're trying to change it, and it's a bit of a dinosaur. Obviously Grenfell has happened and the council is trying to change, but they're still stuck in the past in a way. These are part of the challenges in a way. When the damage has been done, in this instance, it's such an obvious thing, it's really hard to correct. So in a way, we almost need to stop or cause a halt. But this is causing catalysts who own the land. So in a way, this is part of the thing. It's the catalysts own that land, so they have the planning permission from 2010. So really, all the pressure needs to go on them to try to get them to try to come back into the community. So we have who owns the land and how people are accountable in power. I mean, how can we call them to account? Because I mean, we've been complaining. We've gone to the mayor. We go to our MP. The MP says you need to go back to the council. We go to our mayor. The mayor says it's a council matter. We can't communicate with the government. We try various ministry departments to try to communicate, saying this is quite an important issue. It'd be good to get support. So we're sort of bouncing around. So yeah, it is this level, it's sort of the different power structures in place, and the individual and the community is obviously at the heart of it. And obviously the way we work, the way we understand what's going on, because it's partly is understanding what's happened and what our environment means. So for example, what is the Westway? I mean, we kind of we know about it physically as a thing. We can't sort of measure or see the impacts of it directly with all those, I've forgotten what it is, 600,000 cars going across every day. It's a huge amount. And then obviously the importance of being able to cycle around. I mean, there was talk about cycling around and through the Westway as well. There's trying to get new cycle links going. So it's sort of understanding what's going on. I mean, it's in our area, it's on our doorstep, it's in our immediate area, but we don't actually even know what's really taking place until it's almost too late, or the terms are being imposed at which we understand them. We're being told this is the way you need to think about it. So yeah, part of it is these things. So really the community needs to really come together in a sense and really start to sort of draw up some new rules for engagement with authority, so that we can sort of level back and shift that power relationship. Because at the heart of it, we're still sort of playing, it's a bit of a ping pong, and we sort of win small scale things, but ultimately we don't seem to be able to fully influence them. So yes, we do need, in a sense, we are a radical community, we've got radical history here. So we do need to sort of think in some radical ways, in a way. It's not easy. So, and also for the future generation coming in, like yourself, we really need young people as well to really take on that mantle and really express what the future will be. I think we're a little bit alarmed about what's happening with our future. I mean, 20, 30 years time, a tree is a nice symbol because it's been standing. Our Warrington trees have been standing for 40 years. They're going to be cut down and that's gone. There should be a way of building around a tree in this day and age rather than cutting it down.
I agree. And I think Grenfell was a big wake up to me. It was a big wake up call. I think my understanding and interest in the community and of the history of the community and the diversity of the community, and obviously subconsciously I was immersed in our community, and I just think after Grenfell it just woke me up to a lot of things, and it's something that I'm now really passionate about, and I do think it's something that we do need to bring young people on board with, because they're what going to really drive this into the future and for the future generations. I mean, I've now got 2 young children, And I think that it's so important that we create a space that is not only healthy but happy for this community to thrive in, because it's such a creative, amazing space, full of brilliant creatives. I'm sure I don't need to remind you, but yeah, I think I'm definitely on board with that. What are your thoughts on this, Marco? You're on mute, I think, Marco.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, no, there's so much to pick up on what people have said. So, I mean, there's that temporal element that you're talking about, Tayshan, and Constantine was mentioning. We're kind of haunted by the legacies of our past, and we don't realize until it's too late to do things. The Westway was the only bit of planned infrastructure since Holland Park Avenue, which was a Roman road to Silchester, in 2,000 years. And the third bit of planned infrastructure across the borough was the Kensington cycle lane, which has now been taken out after only a couple of months. So we really are locking in kind of crazy behaviors by letting things just sort of spiral out of our own control. The Grand Union Canal was private speculation. A lot of the housing that was built around Ladbroke Grove was private speculation as well. So I think, and that kind of haunts us to this day. We don't have a systemic approach to tackling our problems, and our problems, as Jonathan mentioned, with the Waltham Forest thing, they're multifaceted. There's lots of interlinkages between different issues, and unfortunately, I think the way that the council's set up in the way that, and I work for one, so I think I can freely say this, where it's extremely sort of siloed, where departments don't really speak to each other. The outcome of that is going to be kind of tokenistic gestures, like the really ill thought out low traffic neighborhood attempt in St. Quintin's a few months ago. And just to kind of give you an example of how these strange kind of siloed thinking works, all you have to do is go to Brentford and try to cycle from Brentford all the way into central London. You'll go through Hounslow, Hammersmith, Kensington, and at each point, people go around London forever not knowing which borough they're in. It's not like a big thing, but as soon as you get on a bike, you suddenly realize where the pinch points are between different overlapping authorities. And there's a question to resolve here about how do we introduce more systemic thinking, and it's conversations like this. I agree with you, Tayshan, and also how do we break down the kind of silos so that people share evidence and hopefully speak together and have more sort of productive outcomes?
I definitely think there's a lot of miscommunication, whether that be on purpose or just due to lack of engaging with each other, I guess. And I think that it is a unified effort. This is something that, we all want the same thing to happen. We all want to live in greener, safer, healthier spaces. And I just do think that there needs to be more information and more of a collective effort to get to that point, which I think this is why I think this talk is such a great talk to have. So in terms of our community, what kind of solutions do you think that are, I know that Better Streets for KNC are doing amazing work, and what can you see in the next year or two? What are the solutions in terms of engaging with the council, but also some physical things that we can try and do to green up our spaces?
To me?
Yeah, if we start with you, Jonathan, then we can.
Okay. So there's so much in the head that I'm just trying to itemize it clearly rather than go off into a speech. So I think there's a really good discussion to be had around what's called low traffic neighbourhoods, because if you look around parts of our community already, there's elements there. So if you go down to Clarendon Road and Clarendon Cross, you can see roads have been partitioned. You've got trees in the middle, planters. If you got to near the Tabernacle in Colville, they've pedestrianised the area in front of the church, and you've got lovely trees, paving area. And imagine when we're not in lockdown, people get out there and enjoy the space. And I think there's a real discussion to be had on low traffic neighbourhoods, because North Kensington is, for all the kind of things that you could look around and say we've got railways and canals that cut us off, they are an asset. There's only a few points into North Kensington by road, but those points are hugely busy and congested. And then once they're in, they spew through our streets. And when I used to take my son to school to St. Charles, that road was rammed with cars cutting through Barbie Road to get away from the roundabout, cutting through and down, and it was gridlocked as well as the school traffic. And there's some really simple things we could do that would maintain access for all the residents. But for example, if you look at St. Charles Square, you could do similar things. You could pedestrianise outside St. Pius Church. You could create some lovely green space there, and it acts as a road filter. And then you could take other areas and filter them through. And once you've got parklets and things like that, you reduce the traffic level down. People will have their streets to enjoy, and people will start thinking about how can we use the space differently. While it's dominated by cars, we're almost restricting people to how to think about how we use the community. And then you've got the parade of shops down St. Helens Road. If that was like the video in Walthamstow, if you had kind of one lane there and then space for cafes to put their chairs out, have more space to community to use it, people will start walking and using the communities differently. You have new shops opening, shops equals jobs, and then the community becomes more self-sustaining. But just with a few actions, I think we could see change happening. And once people see the change, then they can grasp it and manage it themselves and say, well, this is what we want to do.
I think there's something really powerful about kind of showcasing how we can reclaim our spaces, especially I think for young people, seeing that it is feasible to do. I think you then get people that respect spaces that they're then involved in building, and if you had your hand, you get involved in it. I think there will be a kind of like a legacy built, which will then carry on for future generations. I think there's so many things that we could do, and one thing that I'm really keen to do is, like I say, get young people involved, and like you mentioned, I think greening up spaces in urban areas, I think is something I'm really passionate about. Marco and Constantine, have you got any thoughts on solutions that we might be able to
Sorry, Tayshan, have you is your microphone a bit muffled, Tayshan?
Yeah, I think if you don't mind about jumping in quickly, Constantine. Yeah, I think that something that everyone's touched on is about agency. It's about giving the community power to do things over their space. Our public space is dominated by roads. And, half of that is parked cars that are not used 90% of the time, or more probably. And there are already a lot of tools that exist that would enable you to do that. The play streets, for example, that means that you can open up a street to pedestrians or close it to cars, depending on which way you see it, at any point. And you would bypass any fees that you need to pay the council. So I would recommend every street in North Kensington that is a residential street that isn't necessary for through traffic, it automatically becomes a play street, so that people can reclaim that space. I think that we've got some amazing green curators like you, Tayshan, but also people at the Westway Trust that are gardeners. And I think it would be great if the Westway Trust's kind of gardening team became a way for people to learn about how they can create micro gardens inside or small gardens. Is there a way to open that up? And so I think that there are kind of tools that already exist, the assets that we already have in our community that everyone has mentioned. It's drawing on those and giving power back to people to determine what they want to do with the space in front of their home.
I think, extending on what you've said, I think part of that, giving that power to the community is kind of having places where we can educate people on these processes and these ideas and these ways forwards. And I think, rather than it just happening, you know, loads of different things happening in different corners. I think it needs to be something that is shared and something that, you know, can inspire, because I think there's definitely so much more to learn, so much more to do, you know, especially with inner city dwellings, especially in North Kensington, especially, you know, with the Westway cutting through it. I think it's more important than ever to kind of have these spaces where we can talk about it, but also educate people on ways that we might be able to come up with a solution.
Yeah, just to come back on that for 1 second before handing over to Constantine. I mean, I think, you know, what you mentioned about sort of waking up to the area after Grenfell in a way, you know, reconnecting with things. It's like that's the thing, we take things for granted all the time. And you're right, education, without education, you don't really understand. Oh, right, so the street doesn't have to be like this. It's only been like this for the last 30, 40 years. If you look at photos of North Kensington from the 50s and 60s, people playing in the streets. I mean, they weren't perfect streets. I'm not saying that they at all, but, you know, there's people using the spaces in different ways than just through traffic, you know? So what are the new ways that we could imagine the spaces, and how can we get the power to you know, act on that imagination?
And I'll come in here just to talk a little bit more about Warnington Green. The estate as it was quite hermetically sealed. So the regeneration, the whole idea of the regeneration was actually to break up the estate and create new roads. So perhaps not many people in the area are aware of this. There are new roads coming in to that whole estate. And Portobello Road and Warnington Road will go all the way through now up to Ladbroke Grove Road. So this regeneration is creating new streetscapes. Now, with all this sort of permeables, all this sort of hard road surface that's been introduced, we're losing all the greens. It was a unique feature of the estate that was actually recognised by the master plan architects. Actually said one unique thing about the estate is its green spaces. But then just ignored that when they went to just completely erase it all and rebuild around it. I mean, it's just shocking contradiction in terms there. But we have this regeneration happening. We're trying to affect a change in it as a community. And what the community is coming up with is some form of retribution, actually, some form of compensation, not retribution, compensation for the loss of all these trees. This is obviously having a devastating impact on the health and well-being of the wider area. So we're looking at a big planted screen. We're talking about it as like a forest of North Kensington. Now, Catalyst Housing they have listened to some of us, our things, and they found a way of saving just 2 trees. So out those 42 trees that would be cut down, they actually, when they went back and looked at their plans in the space of a month, they found a way of saving 2 trees. So obviously they really do need to sort of take a longer look, and they have already cut down 100 already. So the damage has been done. But so we're looking at now coming up with a plan where we can plant a lot more trees now, because what they've already planted are saplings, tiny little trees that they don't compensate for the maturity of the London plane trees that were there. They are going to plant some more trees, but we actually want a far more ambitious program, and we actually want to decide and shape that with professional input. So we actually want to really present a plan that we can present to Catalyst. And that's something that members of the community are currently drawing up. We're trying to get the expertise now as well of arboricultural specialists who can help us devise. And it's not just replacing the London plane trees that were there, because they were obviously a Victorian answer to sort of the pollution. We might need to have more of a mixed planting regime. This is something, once again, that Catalyst have not picked up on. They've just immediately said, oh, you liked London plane trees, we will now plant more London plane trees back in its place. I mean, so we're now thinking that we need to have a little bit of a mixture, because obviously climate change, however it unfolds over the coming 50, 100 years, whether it's going to be 1 degree going up, 5 degrees going up in 50 years, I mean, we're going to suddenly have a sort of a heat island effect. And trees and green spaces are going to be so vital. So, but different types of plants and foliage might be needed. So it's a good question to put out there, because we don't actually know this yet. We don't really know what's the best type of planting regime. So the community is asking out for people in the wider community, academics, anybody, people who have got specialist knowledge as well, who can advise us, because we're currently working on a plan. So that's just one example of a community sort of coming together in adversity to come up with a positive solution. And I think part of the problems as well is we're obviously constantly reacting, and we're obviously constantly kind of battling negative things. We're having to expend a lot of energy in actively standing in front of trees to protect them. We don't have the free time. We need to have free time as individuals to be able to come up with playful concepts where we can do meaningful work. So it's actually, there is something really about where I can see a lot of empathy here, because there's a lot of I think I've had a kind of quite difficult 2-3 months with the campaign, with like a complete, it's like an ups and downs, but an amazing bonding and sharing and becoming really a part of the community there. But it has taken its toll. And that's just somebody who's just running it, and seeing the impacts on the other residents in particular, people who might have asthma, and people who just would look out their window and they would see the squirrels for 40 years and would want to fill them, and then one day all those trees are gone. So yeah, it's been difficult. So trying to be positive in the midst of the negativity is a bit of a challenge. But I think we are a very resilient community, and as we come together, I think there's something about the community. We always sort of we do rally around and we battle away. So I think I put my optimistic hat on to think how we can then work strategy for the coming. Obviously, we're looking to present something in the coming months. The regeneration has got years to unfold, but it's a crucial time window now, because the last part of the regeneration hasn't gone through. It's still at planning stage. So we've got to try to affect a seismic change in the council and catalyst to really try to get them back with the community. The signs are not good. They want to carry on. So yeah, I've got this positive, negative energy around me.
Yeah, I think we really need to, just kind of touching on what all of you have alluded to, I think we really need to revolutionize the way that we communicate with the council and work with the council on more than just projects, in green spaces, whether that be buildings, whether that be parks. And I think the shift of power, it needs to be, I think the community needs to have more of a say, and it needs to be more of an extensive consultation with the community to see what the community really needs and what the community really wants. And I just think that the way that the community has reached out to isn't extensive enough to even understand half of it. And so I think once you get the community on board in that way, and you've got an invested interest on the people that are actually benefiting from those spaces, I think you'll then find that the community are more, the spaces will be more beneficial to the community, rather than having spaces that aren't of any benefit to anyone, because someone who's nothing to do with the community has made a decision based on what they think the community might need or otherwise. And that's something I'm really keen to explore in the ways that we can engage and, facilitate that engagement with the community, to ensure that we are in spaces that we are in that we want and that are of benefit to us. And I think, the pandemic has really changed the way that we see outdoor spaces and the way that we see gardens. And I mean, I live in Lancaster West, and I'm lucky. I've got those shared spaces, and I've got maybe the smallest balcony. But there's some people that don't even have that. It really makes you think of the impact of the mental health impacts on people that don't have that access to. I don't have my own garden in that sense, and I think you have that link to having a garden, but then also being able to afford a garden in the city of London. I think we need to create more access to more green spaces and enable more people to have access to those green spaces. And I think the only way you're going to do that is by talking to people and engaging with them, because not everyone is going to have a garden, but there are going to be green spaces, or we can create green spaces and more green spaces for people of our community to use. So it kind of leads to the point of on estates. If we bring it to kind of estates, so for example, somewhere like Lancaster West or Trellick Tower, how can we bring gardens to those residents, people that, or in Mornington, how can we bring green spaces to people that don't necessarily have their own garden?
Well, I I think there's a couple of things there. Firstly, this public spaces around estates generally, have been characterized by being like fragmented by lots of different small walls that kind of segments different spaces around, and they don't look or seem inviting, or people and so often there's a kind of a level of abandonment, and so that firstly needs to change. The curation of the immediate public space around estates needs to, inside blocks. I mean, like Lancaster West, you're lucky for those finger blocks with beautiful parks inside, as you said. There's an image on the screen of completely rethinking architecture to make it much more connected with nature, and having everyone having balconies and green spaces. Obviously, I think there's a building like this in Milan called the Vertical Forest. But it's tricky to retrofit that onto the existing building stock. So one of the things that I mentioned before was, why not use things like the Westway Trust gardening team to help people maybe cultivate things indoors, have an indoor plant. And actually, when I was helping out with RAP 23, shout out to Dio and Eve, whose female energy I'm trying to channel in this testosterone fueled panel. But that, as part of that kind of, we had an event a few weeks before the tragedy to raise awareness about air pollution in the area. And as part of that event, there was a mass giveaway of small plants so people could take a plant away with them and look after it. And through those kind of small gestures, they could change it. I do think that the streets really are where the opportunity is for gardens, because streets, that's our public space. The space between the buildings, that is space that we should be able to determine what happens. What if, imagine now if your parking space outside, or one parking space on your street, just one, was a community garden, or even a shed for community tools to do things. What else could it be? I mean, I'm sure that there'll be a lot of people with much better ideas than us out there in the community. If you just ask them, what else could that one parking space on your street be? That could be a thought-provoking start to find out.
It's quite funny, because I don't think that, and like when I take a step back from it all, and I kind of, when I go on the Grenfell silent walks, and when I think about the conversation that we're having, it's like, how did we get to this point? Why are we even talking about why we should green up spaces and how we should, surely it's a given. Why have we got to this point? It's something that frustrates me. And I think it's something that, there are solutions out there. I had the pleasure of speaking to Ron Finley not too long ago, and he's in the US, and obviously what he did there was pretty amazing. I thought it was pretty cool. And they call him the Gangster Gardener. And it was really simple, but he simply turned a public space out on the front of his lawn into somewhere where he could really cherish, and I think he used it to grow his own foods. But then came up against the law, and it's like, well, why? Why should he be in trouble for greening up the space and turning it into a more beautiful, beneficial space to the community? I'm just wary of time also, that I think Alexander the Great is waiting in the background. I think he's performing for us tonight. So I think we're going to go to Alexander the Great, and then we'll come back to this conversation after that. I hope that's okay.
Sure. Hello. Good evening, everyone. Is it introduce yourself?
Yeah, please do.
Shall I go ahead then? Can you hear?
I think you're good to go.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, because I live in the area. I've been living here for about 26 years now. Originally lived in Chiswick, nice green area. But those of you who know me, Constantine and so on, I'm pretty much involved in the Carnival business. I'm a Calypsonian. and I write what can be considered, I suppose, to be conscious calypsos. And I've got a song called Carnival's Going Green, which was written last year. I belong to quite a few groups that try to improve things, carnival for elders, for children, for people who enjoy the celebration but also want to participate. And there's a move now to be more considerate of the way carnivals are run. There's lots of different initiatives going on around the country, not particularly in Notting Hill at the moment, but then it's so big, it's very difficult to move things along, but they're going in the right direction. But I was at a conference last year in Bristol, just before the lockdown, actually, a couple of weeks before the lockdown, and saw things like bicycle-driven speakers, where the power is done by someone pedaling on a bike, and those kinds of initiatives, percussion instruments made out of recycled, bicycle wheels and things like that. So the whole initiative, what we're talking about in North, and I live in North Kensington too. I'm actually a local resident here. So the idea is very much close to my heart. There's going to be new building from Catalyst in the area where I live as well. My son went to St. Charles School, so I spent many years, or quite a few years, picking him up from there and taking him back. And he played in the Venture Centre on Warnington, or behind Warnington, part of it. And so it's all very much close to my heart. So I'm going to sing the song first. It's called Carnival's Going Green. Folks in carnival mood like to drink and eat food, but they don't always use common sense. Litter dropped here and there, like they really don't care, could be seen as a lack of conscience. So let us not forget the example to set, that recycling our waste is more fair. For the environment, our collective consent will improve Carnival everywhere. Moving towards a greener Carnival, we're heading towards a fairer festival. How can we refuse to reconstruct and reuse, when that is the path we must choose? If we want to be sure we're not archival, we simply cannot become archival. So we're moving towards a greener Carnival. Carnival's going green. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. Some costumes are discarded, at times disregarded, and people just leave them there in the street. Though they've been rejected, they can be collected and reclaimed once again, clean and neat. By adapting leathers, refurbishing feathers, next year's costumes may not cost so much. Outfits made entirely from what once was debris give a satisfying personal touch. Moving towards a greener Carnival, we're heading towards a fairer festival. How can we refuse to reconstruct and reuse, when that is the path we must choose? If we want to be sure of our survival, we cannot simply become archival. So we're moving towards a greener Carnival. Carnival's going green. Da 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 da. Sound systems wanted loud to attract a big crowd, saying this is where everyone meets. Diesel trucks on the road are adding to the load of particulates filling our streets. But the time is now here when we need to be clear that this adds to the noise pollution, while electricity is more user-friendly and should be part of the solution. revolution. Moving towards a greener carnival. We're heading towards a fairer festival. How can we refuse to reconstruct and reuse when that is the path we must choose? If we want to be sure of our survival, we cannot simply become archival. So we're moving towards a greener carnival. Carnival's going green. Da 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 da. Carnival disciplines make sure everyone wins when they use disposable plastics. Power from a bicycle, clothes that we recycle, are all things to put into the mix. Broken glass cuts the cost of the energy lost when it's manufactured from scratch still. What is reclaimable is more sustainable, lightening the burden on our landfill. Moving towards a greener carnival, we're heading towards a fairer festival. How can we refuse to reconstruct and reuse when that is the path we must choose? If we want to be sure of our survival, we cannot simply become archival. So we're moving towards a greener carnival. Carnival's going green. Yes, we're moving towards a greener carnival. Carnival's going green. There you go. Carnival's going green. But it's all within the, thank you. It's all within the remit of North Kensington, because of course it passes through that area pretty much. I think I've been listening with real interest to what you've all been saying, and it's been really interesting and really good. My hope is that, and one of the suggestions was getting the children in schools to know about it, put it on the curriculum. I think that most head teachers of most of the schools in North Kensington would happily agree with that, because today's children are tomorrow's counsellors, some of them. And if they grow up believing in those values, then we will see a sea change. We've got a long way to go, because unfortunately, I don't want to be political on here, maybe the wrong forum, but we are entering a world, we've been entering a world for a while now, for 10, 15 years, that's getting more and more fascistic. I'm talking about the whole world, right from the Americas all the way over to, you know, Asia and across. We see it in various heads of state, in the way, I mean, including our own government, which seems to be perfectly happy to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia and not concerned about what happens, or seem to be unconcerned about the fact that this has devastating effects on Yemen and other things like that. So the future is in the hands of the young, and if we tell the young, if we inform the young now of how important it is for them to save their world and for their children, then that maybe is the way to get the message through. I think I've done a lot of work in a lot of the schools in North Kensington, St Charles, St Mary's, Bevington, lots of them around and about. And the heads I've met have always been really forward-thinking, good, you know, they're wonderful places. And the children are wonderful. We just need to make sure that the message is, you know, infuses their learning. Let's put it that way, really.
Thank you so much, Alexander the Great. That was really uplifting. I've been digging holes all day in a garden, and that was it was such a thank you for lifting our spirits. And yeah, and I think just extending on what you've said, like, I think where I feel really passionate about is getting young people into gardening, and the perceptions on who a gardener is and who can get into gardening, who can get involved in nature. And I think it's something that is fundamental to life, fundamental to everything that we do, and is the solution in many ways, whether that be through mental health, whether that be through on the journey to food sovereignty, whether that be into more sustainable ways of living. I just think it is the answer to many of the questions that are raised. And I think where you're really going to create change is by educating and empowering and inspiring the younger generations to then carry those lessons learned to come up with innovative solutions and to integrate that into their daily life and make them aware, why are things like this and why have things been like this and how can I change it and where might I go with it? And I think that's something that I'm extremely passionate about. And like I mentioned before, I'm now 24 years old, and I see life slightly differently now. I think kind of, I'm a dad, and things have changed now. I think a few years ago, if you asked me about if I was involved in this conversation, I would have been lost. I wouldn't have known what to say or what to do, or my understanding of things would have been very different. But now I just really do believe that this is something that we really need to drive into schools, and something that we need to create awareness on, not just through young people but through everyone. But I do think that the fight will be with young people, where we can take it forwards. And so that kind of puts a question that I'd like to ask you guys is that, how do you think we can get more young people involved in this? Go for it, Jonathan. I see your hand up.
Cheers.
Slightly.
So there's been lots of really interesting things there from Constantine and Alexander around, and I was thinking about leadership, and so there's a bit of honesty we need with leadership. We're talking about environment and green, and the whole purpose is to reduce our carbon footprint, make it better. We're not going to do that by doing the same things that we've done yesterday and the day before, because that's why we're here today in a worse situation. So we need change, but we need leaders to say that we need change, and we need people to be honest around saying, how do we change our lives? Not so much that it's an inconvenience, but so much that we can adapt and change our behaviors. And then onto the schools. The schools are amazing. I think I went to St. Charles. I was a governor at Bevington, and we've seen recently with Kensington High Street cycle lane, Fox School coming out, not just the teachers, the children. The children were on the streets telling the council, this is what we want. And they were joined by 17 other schools saying, we want change and we want to be part of that change. And part of leadership is not just being honest with people, but it's also giving people the platform and supporting them. I had a discussion recently about Kensington versus where I work. And what I value about work is that I've been given the agency to go out and change and support people. People have wanted to start cycling and start active travel. And I've been supported in doing that, achieving that. And then I contrasted it with where I live. I don't feel that. And the kids were empowered by the teachers, who are amazing people, to go onto the street. And then on Wednesday night, they weren't listened to. So we need leadership to be empowering people, because, as everyone has said here, the agents of change are us, and we're all through the community. And if we come together, we can do it. But leadership is both being honest about change, it's about supporting people to be part of that and lead change themselves. And whether it's political or not, I don't think we have that yet, and we need that.
No, agreed. No, some really good points you made. I think more young people need to realize how and see the idea to action process, and that it can be done. You think about something and you want to change something, and you can action it. And I think that a lot of young people feel a bit powerless in where they're at, and I feel like they feel a bit boxed in and a bit definitely powerless. And I definitely did growing up. I mean, never took interest in politics, never took interest in social action, and didn't really understand those words. But I don't think that. I think it's almost on purpose that those things are kept away from young people, so that when you get to like my age and you realize, oh, like these things impact me like heavily. And I do think that these are conversations that we need to start having at a younger age. Obviously, age-related conversations. But I mean, there's so many lessons gardening or nature can teach a young person about responsibility, about healing, the healing process, the growth, I just think it's reflective of all parts of life. I just do think it's something that we can really bring into the hands of young people. I think it's something that young people would really appreciate.
But can I add one thing? I think that's all true, but I think there's so much young people can teach us and teach the leaders. Because if you go out there and ask them, how can you improve your area? They've got all the answers. They know. They go, oh, we want to cycle more, we want more parks, we want to play football, da 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 da. We don't need to teach them that. They know that. We need to be listening to them, and then we almost need to be retaught ourselves, because sometimes, whether it's age or whatever, we might lose a bit of that as we get older, and we just really need reminding of that, and we need that honesty in the conversation. But yes, we need to teach them because they're learning, but there's so much they can teach us as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that creativity I think it's been shown through tests on divergent thinking, that your creativity reduces as you get older, as you get more and more boxed into things, because you don't have you lose the capacity to think outside of your box. I think just a couple of points on young people. Obviously, I can't speak for them, but I wholeheartedly agree with you, Jonathan, about listening to them, and I think that if people could, if you could look at something just differently for one day, like the Carnival is a great example. Suddenly the streets are just overturned for one day, and you see all kinds of new possibilities. And I think if someone heard Constantine talk about a tree in the way that he was talking about them before, as these kind of stories of value, time, you suddenly sort of, you can't unsee it, and you will start thinking about trees like that again. And it's something as simple as a tree on your street or nearby, to the kind of amazing things that exist in and around North Kensington. Just think about if anyone goes to Wormwood Scrubs at when the sun is going down. It's one of the most magical sort of feelings ever when all the parakeets fly in to hang out on the trees. It's no one could deny that. And I think those just exposing people to the things that exist already in the neighborhood, like you were saying, Jonathan, about places that have already been pedestrianized. They already exist. Let's celebrate those places. Let's say that these are the things that those should be the departure points for change. I also agree with your point about it's this combination of kind of local people having agency and then a leadership level of things changing. There are things like green leases where if you want to be a tenant in a place as a commercial entity, you have to adhere to certain environmental things. And what Alexander the Great was saying about the Carnival, there are so many touch points at the Carnival that could be reframed to be greener as well. I saw a project I remember a few years ago in Brazil where urinals were spinning dynamos to power the battery of the floats. Let's embrace these kind of other ideas, and as you say, not do the same things that we've been doing yesterday.
Hi, Tayshan. Could I chip in here a little bit?
For sure, yeah.
Thanks. Just wanted to pick up on something that that Jonathan said about the schools and the children. I think we have to remember what our young people have actually grown up with. I'm in my 40s now. We have people on the panel who, are, of that kind of age. But actually, young people have been learning different things in school to what we learned. When I was at school, when I was at primary school and even secondary school, when I went to Holland Park, I don't really recall anything about the environment in any of our lessons, really. There might have been some stuff about in physics, maybe about something to do with kind of space, but there was no kind of education that really spoke about recycling, consumption, anything like that. Now, I've been working in schools for about the last 15 years or so, and throughout that time, there has been a solid push, both in the curriculum and extracurricular work to push the environment. I've done lots of things, radio shows, arts projects, etc., that have often been geared around the environment. Kids making songs about the environment, children making artworks about the environment, etc., etc. So it really shouldn't be any surprise to us that actually our young people are now talking about these things. As we know, young people generally, are more clued up about various social issues. Their politics tends to sway a certain way to reflect that. So then when I think about this systemic issue, I think it's fascinating that we've been bringing up young people for the past 20 years, 15, 20 years, in a way that makes them more aware of environmental issues and more capable of thinking about and discussing and reacting to environmental issues, and then we ignore them. Like, how much more of a clear sort of symbol of our systemic failure can you get than that? You're actually teaching these young people to fix the world and to be part of the solution. And then in many instances, you're kind of blocking their solution. You're blocking them. You're blocking the very thing that you've created.
Yeah, I mean, Greta Thunberg is the ultimate example of that, isn't she? Where, but I think just to bring it back to a local example, Imperial College's new campus at White City, they've got some of the best engineers in the world in terms of green and blue infrastructure, and they can't even, the development arm of Imperial can't even listen to them. So, I mean, what chance do children have?
No, it's important points raised, and I think there needs to be more access to resources for young people to then, like I said, turn those ideas into actions and see it in real life. And I think that detachment from giving young people that hope and then taking that hope away from them is all too common for me and definitely friends that I have. And I do think it's time to create that change and give more power to young people to create change in their communities. I think initially when I jumped into a garden, I kind of thought, what am I doing here? My perception of a gardener wasn't me. And I think that's what then made me question, well, why do I feel that way? Why are my mates who are so used to seeing me on a football pitch confused as to why I'm in a garden? Like, what is the context behind that? And I think we really need to break down those barriers to enable young people to then kind of embrace the change that we can then drive. And so that's something that I think, pushing that into it is in the curriculum, but I don't believe almost enough, and it's definitely not compulsory at this moment in time. And definitely something I'd love to see change. But also, on what all of you have touched on is enabling that, why are you educating young people to then kind of suppress their ideas and suppress their thoughts on how we can change things with very feasible solutions? And like you mentioned, Imperial College and their facility to implement something that could change the way that we see new builds in this country, or the amount of rooftop spaces in London, flat rooftop spaces that would be feasible to have blue-green roofs on. But yet, why are we not giving them resources to then action that? I think it's an important point made.
Tayshaun, could I come in?
Sure.
Tayshaun? Thank you. This is Jacob.
Hi, Jacob.
Hello, everyone. I think it's been a brilliant discussion. High and low on its levels of knowledge in the area, base level and really good understanding. I think you should tell your football mates that you probably have better lungs than them with your contact with nature, because obviously it's shocking when you hear about our children will have smaller lungs and smaller organs. So if they want to win something, go green. But I want to just feedback on. I hate to do this, but it always goes back to the council and Constantine, when he talked about the change and that, you know, the council is trying to change, but they're working with the older, you know, decisions and stuff. But what I've sort of come to, you know, with all of the things, like if we're talking about North Kensington, whether it's, you know, the planning, development, you know, how they're building the housing, you know, and you know, like you know, we have Pablo, we have Marco, and they, you know, they are experts, and they're bringing these things, concepts like, you know, the blue-green dream, and, you know, this sort of building nature into, you know, the planning and you know, from the start, and, you know, all of these, you're hearing all of these co-design concepts, you know, really well thought out, brilliant, you know, brilliant. Lots of people in the area are learning about it. And I would say, put to all of you, you know, would it help if the people that were in the council who were making the decisions on say the planning, or had the portfolio for, you know, I'm not sure that it's proper title, maybe it's the housing, you know, came, you know, were actual councils in the wards where they were making those decisions, because we can vote out Pat Mason, we can vote out you know, Emma Dent Code, you know, they are we can hold them to account. We can meet them in the street as well. So at the moment, I feel we're living in a bit of a dictatorship where they can really do whatever they want to us, and they have. You know, they literally have. There's not much more. And you know, I think in the last meeting we had, is like we turned the energy to the council, and the whole meeting went to the council, and it was a good point made that we shouldn't be doing that, because, you know, it's a traumatic thing just to mention the council. But yeah, so the democratizing of you know, of the social, you know, where we live, the our of the borough, or the democracy, you know, democratizing, you know, how we live. Would that help? Because we're saying, like, you know, why aren't we implementing these things? So in North Kensington, you know, when we're looking at the new developments, or we're looking at the trees, would it help if those decision makers knew that if they, you know what I mean, if they didn't really represent us, we wouldn't be voting them back in?
Yes, I'll just jump in. Yes, it would. Thinking about it, but in the case of the trees, obviously that's a catalyst land. The councillors do at least live in RBKC, so I think they do have a sense of place and connection. And obviously, obviously trees are very common in the south of the borough, and they're much cherished. And it'd be quite difficult to see those knocked down en masse. But Catalyst, the people who run Catalyst, I'm just struggling to think, who do any of those live in the area? So do they have an emotional connection with the place? This is another thing. It's like also with young people, how we develop. For example, me, I mean, I've been recycling for decades. I've been cycling for decades. I've been sort of thinking I was a bit of an environmentalist, but it was only until I sort of make a personal, emotional connection with something that was unfolding on a sort of a micro scale before my very eyes, and I felt impelled to come in and connect to it. So there's something about making an emotional connection to something that's going on that gives you an energy. But then if you're in isolation, you're struggling. So yeah, it's definitely something around how we feel around the issues, and then how that filters out, and we get a network going. And I'm just, so Jacob, when you just talked about that, the council there, I had this slightly left field thought, and thinking about Frestonia, how Frestonia was formed as an alternative structure. So maybe we should establish a parallel council made up of members of the community who then have to comment or reflect. There's like a parallel relationship between the council and a parallel community council. And I'm just thinking of my feet here, and that community then takes over some of the powers of those. There has to be more of a symbiotic link between it somehow in terms of filtering down and understanding, because obviously decisions get made and they sort of filter down. Sometimes there's a backflow and it goes up after consultation. Sometimes it doesn't work. So yeah, it's maybe thinking in new ways of working, fundamentally new ways of working. Maybe the council model is not fully fit. I mean, it's got the whole history behind it. You know, there's the town hall and everything about it as a sort of an institution. But as we know, the people in the community really care about the places they live, and they're the ones there. They should have that sort of real say. But it's a difficult thing, because are they going to be objective about making those decisions? So it's just what I'm just thinking. You know, it's a delicate process there, isn't it, between the council and the individual, and what's the relationship? I see you holding up your hand there, Alexander.
Yeah, it's just that I wanted to reflect on the fact that Pat Mason and Emma Dent Code are two of the most committed councillors to the sort of things we're trying to achieve here. I think that, I mean, I went on lots of the Grenfell marches early on, and Emma Dent Code was often, well, most of the time she would turn up, rain, shine, whatever it happened to be. And I noticed that the party that's now back in power are far less inclined to do those sorts of things. I mean, it's a case of, I agree with the idea that we should have residents who are part of perhaps a separate council that advises the council of RBKC as to what to do. But whether you would have more sympathetic councillors than the ones mentioned, I don't know. The fact of the matter is that the old, extremely, what I consider to be right-wing council that have been in power for years are responsible for the tragedy of Grenfell, because they wouldn't listen to advice, are now back in charge again. And there was only a small respite for the short time that Emma was in place, and she tried to do what she could. And as you said, Constantine, sorry, what you said was they live in the area. They do know what's going on. And I think they care to a greater extent than the people who are now in power. Because I send things to our local MP about all sorts of things from time to time. And frankly, I'm always fobbed off, albeit politely, about all sorts of things. I mean, I'm I've always been quite radical and pretty kind of, defending, if you like, what I think is the right thing, and very political too, for someone who should have grown up years ago and never has them, really. I'm still a bit of a rabble-rouser when it comes to that. So maybe the idea, as you were saying, of having a separate council of residents who are nothing to do with the council of RBKC, but are strong enough perhaps to influence the council's thinking. But I don't think our local councillors are particularly bad, certainly in North Kensington. I think they do a reasonably good job considering what they're up against. Anyway, just my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the idea of forming an alternative, there's what happened in the kind of after the war shows both the power of the council and the power of local people, because it was after the war that all of the council estates, as we know them, were built around the area, and a lot of housing was cleared out, as Constantine was talking about for Estonia. So the council really showed how if they want to do something, they can do it. So if they want to transform something into a green space, they could do. And at the same time, people responded with to this and set up, a lot of the social infrastructures that we treasure today, are starting to reconnect with today. The North Kensington Law Centre, the Westway Trust, obviously. I mean, Meanwhile Gardens, etc. All of these things happened in the pockets of space that were overlooked by by the council and in a kind of symbiosis. In terms of sort of bringing back democracy as a, I mean, I think the key thing is enabling people to have agency to do things. I mean, firstly, we need to make the most of the tools that we have, and there are a lot of tools at our disposal. The Grenfell Action Group highlighted that freedom of information requests, responding to consultations, which not enough of us do, writing to your MP. I know it seems futile, but we've got to use those things, and at the same time push to create new things. I think it's kind of a combination of the two. There are ways that we can have more agency. There are things like play streets, neighborhood forums. If there were more of those around, you might be able to deliver more of the things that we're talking about here.
And I think we are in a place where there are so many ways of engaging with people and being engaged. It's not like there's only one avenue in which way you can have an influence on these things. And I do think there needs to be more of a spotlight and more of a think of how, especially from the council's point of view, when consultations do take place, is how we are engaged as a community, given the history and given the given our heavy sentiments towards the council in terms of what's happened in the past. And I think, I do think we do need to revolutionise the way that, or there needs to be some sort of change to the way that the council engage with the community. One project I'm proud to be a part of, and I think Bashir was part of the talk yesterday, which is Maxilla City, and where it's a slightly different project where actually the community, and I was part of Latimer City just after Grenfell, where obviously I was part of turning that space at Maxilla into a more creative space where I met loads of people. I think I bumped into Isis there, and quite a few people I met in that space. But now it's somewhat in community's hands, and I think it's up to the members of Maxilla City, who are the community, to lead on consulting with our own community to ensure that that's beneficial to our community in itself. So I do think there needs to be some sort of change to the way that we engage with the council and they engage with us, because I don't feel like at the moment it's been working. So I think from my point of view, in terms of green spaces in our community, I think we've had some really valid points on the different ways we can green up our spaces. But how do you think that? And I know that Marco, you kind of pointed out about our kind of the way that technology has kind of taken over and we've kind of become disengaged. But I do believe that sometimes technology can be a catalyst to how we could change the way that we see things. And actually, it's really interesting looking into the way that we can engage with more community members through consultation, like looking at the ways that we can potentially use VR to immerse someone in an experience of being in the garden without actually being in the garden. And actually that's a tool that can be used to give access to people who don't have, who might be terminally ill or in a space where they're not able to access a garden, but also to allow young people or community members in general to be a part of the consultation process that enables them to have more of an influence and more of an understanding, but in more of an immersive in a more of immersive way. And I just wondered what your take on using technology as that catalyst, or as a part of getting people involved in green spaces and nature, things like VR, things like AR code, things like AR, things like QR codes, but then beyond using technology as actually something that can be of benefit to engaging with more people in nature.
Was that to me? Should I respond? I can respond briefly, but yeah, I think look, there's everything is technology, right? I mean, our clothes are technology. We create things and then they shape us, is the famous phrase. I think Marshall McLuhan came up with. And parks are technologies. There are technologies to connect us back to nature. That we feel that we're separated from nature, but we're not. It's just technology that mediates our relationship with it. I think that there's an interesting concept that there are two different types of technology. One that makes us kind of more stupid, and one that makes us more engaged and happy. And it's like there's things called complementary cognitive artifacts, which are things like the alphabet or riding a bike. You connect with the landscape around you, and it kind of helps you then understand new things. And then there's things that and what you're talking about, the kind of VR. Someone puts on a headset, and if you're terminally ill and you can be exposed to nature, that's amazing. I mean, that's absolutely transformational. I wouldn't say that's bad at all. But then on the other side, there's competitive cognitive artifacts, which are things that actually, disconnect you from nature. So that's. I mean, I was using the Amazon warehouse as an extreme example where you're completely bewildered, but you can't move around. But the kind of risk is that if you do leave the city to the algorithm of Deliveroo and Uber, then people won't know where they are, and you live in these kind of little micro worlds around, just connected via Uber, and it's not a way to help people connect to their place, that emotional sense that Constantine was talking about, to rethink their environment. But yeah, I mean, I don't see why why not have TikTok filters where people can look at their street and see what it might look like differently. That would definitely help visualize some kind of new thing. I just think, let's not fully let's be aware of the dangers of some of these things, while at the same time taking the best of them.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So I think Marco's right. There are things that can really help us and complement us, and particularly in COVID, I
definitely think there's a fine line, like you said, and with obviously with technology advancing, I think it would be really interesting to see how we could integrate aspects of technology and not completely immerse our community in technology, but sorry.
Back to you, Jonathan.
Okay, sorry. So I was just saying that there's a real role for technology to complement things, particularly in COVID. We've lacked the contact with people, and particularly on issues of whether it's the local campaigns, it's been hard to engage with people. So I think even in normal times, people are using this technology in their everyday lives. So we need to adapt to that and communicate with people how they want to be communicated with. There's also
can you hear me?
I can hear you. Should
I think there's a delay on Tation's end.
I can hear you. Can you hear me now? Okay, I was having connection issues. It was massively delaying and freezing. Apologies.
Shall I quickly complete? Okay. So, and then there's technologies that can really help us. So if we think about the e-assisted bike, for example, that can help us make journeys that we couldn't have done before by bike. So if I think of colleagues at work who live 11 miles away, they were taking the train or whatever, they can now get to work by bike because there's an e-assistance. They get the health benefit, but there's just that little bit of technology. So I think there's really things that we can augment our lives with. And that e-bike journey exposes that colleague to the fresh air, going through the parks and things like that, which otherwise he would have been under the ground coming through to work. And I really think they have roles to augment our lives, to appreciate the local place and our surroundings a lot more. That's me done.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's funny, it's ironic how we're talking about advanced technology and suddenly all of you are frozen on my screen, and I'm probably interrupting you on a delayed stream. Yeah, so apologies for that. But yeah, I think you made some important points, and I think kind of touching on what both of you said, there's a fine line between how technology can be used as a tool that is beneficial, but also something that can be abused and almost misguide people and take and detach them from what we're trying to do, really. Yeah, I think that those are important issues that we should explore. But definitely through consultation, I think. And again, I revert back to young people, but I do think that young people will engage with different consultation techniques that are currently out there. I mean, I can speak on my own personal experience, but also the experience with people that I know. But I just know that if a leaflet comes through my door, more often than not, I'm probably not going to engage with it. And I don't know whether that's something to do with my age or whether it's just anyone, but I just know for a fact that young people, that I just feel as technology has advanced, our kind of attention span has become shorter and shorter. And we've grown up in that environment where it's like click and then onto the next thing, and that's what's been pushed down our throats. And I think the way that we engage with young people, to excite them, we need to engage with them in a way that is already interesting to them, I believe. And I think that is where I think there's a massive gap in the way that we see our spaces and the way that we give young people the capacity to have influence on that, because obviously, because often it goes right over their head because it's not something they would engage with. So I do think that we need to find ways of exciting young people and getting them on board with, when it comes to consultation, and obviously this is very much aimed at the council, it kind of looking at ways we can engage with a wider demographic of people, whether that be gender, age, socioeconomic background, whatever it might be. I just think that different people engage in different ways, and we need to really look at the ways that we engage with different people. So that's just something I wanted to
I was just going to add one point there. So I was just going to add one quick point there about technology. Of course, I completely agree. It's empowering. It generates a lot of new data that needs to be interpreted and understood and controlled in a way. So there's some limits to that. I'm just thinking back at the time when I worked as an artist on Chichester Estate, and to help the residents understand the changes that were taking place to the estate. Basically, it was going to be knocked down. This was just before Grenfell. I worked with Michael Jardine, who lives on the estate. He's an architect, and we built a scale model of the estate, 1 to 100. So we built the estate, Grenfell Tower, everything, and the land around it, just to show and visualize what that was, to show them and get them to interact with it. And we did it at the Chichester Estate Fun Day. We were down there in the middle there, so it's quite. The council were there with their regeneration stall, and we were there with a scale model that was built by the community, trying to engage and understand what the changes were. So yeah, creative solutions to things. So sometimes it is old school forms of communication. And just one quick point there about consultation and information and technology. I just reflect on the consultation that's recently taken place at Warnington Green Estate. I know because it's just gone through this final phase, and they produced a pack. So they produced a physical pack that they posted to the estate, and probably I'm not sure if they did it just outside the estate, what the footprint was, but they delivered to 675 addresses on the estate. And then they had a social media campaign, and that was apparently viewed by about 10,000 people, according to their information. And they had an advert for online meetings that was viewed by about 1,500 people. And they published newsletters and contacted community groups. But out of all this engagement, they had 18 completed returns for a paper consultation, and they had 5 residents attending online events. Now, to me, that was a form that is deciding what's going to come for phase 3 regeneration for Warnington Green. Seriously flawed. So yeah, we do need to find new ways of engaging, creative solutions around technology, but also often door knocking and old school techniques are still very vital.
That's interesting. Just on that point quickly, Constantine, I know we want to go to comments, but I wonder whether or not there should be a kind of level at which, you know, if you don't reach a certain amount of engagement, you can't actually go ahead with the scheme. Like some elections that aren't valid unless you have a certain amount of turnout. And I know that there's this quite controversial estate ballot system now, but I think that's just for estate demolition. I'm not sure if that will change anything. But you know, you have the danger of kind of more politicizing that process even more, which might be tricky.
I'm just wary of time now, guys, and I think there's a few. I think we need to go to comments, and there's a Zoom link, or not link, a Zoom room, if I'm not mistaken, that we're now entering.
Can I just make a quick comment? It's just on a couple of things. In relation to the was it Marco who said, sorry, I'm getting this right. Yeah, Marco who said that mentioned the whole thing about whether or not a consultation should be deemed valid if there weren't enough people who contributed to it. That was an interesting point, because on Monday at the conversation about oh God, what was it? Was it our learning? No, it wasn't our learning. It was was it our homes? Yes, of course, the controversial one. Carol made this point about, or she gave an example of someone she was speaking to who was in somewhere like, you know, Sweden, invariably one of the Nordic countries. And they were very, very surprised to hear that when residents over here objected to things like planning or, you know, massacring our trees or whatever it may be, that if the residents raised their voices and objected, the council or their equivalent couldn't go ahead. So that's an interesting thing. Again, talking earlier about some of the more progressive things that we see and the more environmental friendly things, examples that we see in other countries and other parts of the world. And whilst we were talking about engaging young people, Tayshan knows my daughter, who's still, I suppose, young-ish as well. And I kind of asked her, you know, how would a young person get involved? Bearing in mind, she's late 20s now, so she's not really, really that young. And she was saying, you know, one of the issues is that for young people at the moment, they're really not engaged in all of these things because of the lockdown. It's really kind of affected them. They're really kind of blinkered. They're not really thinking about things. But what she did say was grow food, you know, plant things and grow food. Get young people actually physically doing things, touching the soil and actually engaged. So I think rather than the kind of, you know, the all in the head, actually get them actually doing things, planting things, digging up, growing tomatoes, seeing these things actually come to fruition. And I know I share an allotment with a friend, and being out on the allotment and growing food is a fantastic way. And then perhaps that's one way to bring them back into that sort of, you know, caring and understanding the importance of the environment, of why we have trees and all these other things that are so crucial to who we are. So that's my bit.
No, you're quite right. Can I just chip in there and say I was in Finland in 2017, went there for the Afro-European conference, and their schools, their primary schools, take the kids out one day a week outside, and the teaching is done about environmental things, about trees, about, you know, growing things and all that. And it's built in from a very, very young age, and it'd be fantastic if our education system would embrace that sort of initiative. I mean, I know we live in the big conurbation, we're in a large city and all the rest of it, but it's just a case of putting it, you know, getting a few schools, a few progressive head teachers to say, only one class at a time, we're going to go down to such and such, find a garden centre or find an allotment that is happy to work with the school and to build that sort of relationship where maybe once a week or once a fortnight, that is what the school does. It's a fantastic idea. And children are really interested. I remember, I mean, I'm one of the luckiest people in the world in that my grandmother, when I was quite small, up to about the age of 12, I would go to my grandmother's and she had about 9 different fruits going in her garden. And my job, and my younger brother's, was to pick the fruits and then watch her making jam out of them. And then later on, you know, we pick up jar. It was just the whole process was taken on board by us because we saw it from the point of going in the garden, picking the fruit, to washing it and watching it make, and all those sorts of things. It's very, very important, I think, to get young people to understand our organic links with the earth and our organic links with our food production, all the rest of it. So, yeah, I agree. That's a fantastic idea.
I am wary of time, and just to conclude on that, what you said, I do think that, you know, unless you have someone in your life that, you know, family, your parents, or someone in the family that has some sort of influence on you when it comes to gardening or nature, I do think that you are limited from those opportunities if you don't have someone that takes that interest and is passionate about it from the very get-go. I was lucky to have a mum that was very holistic in the way that she lived and always reverted back to nature. And I feel like that's where, in times of adversity, my love for gardening and my passion for nature really came through and helped me and healed me. But yeah, I don't think that should be the limiting factor to why someone should engage with nature. I do think it should be integrated into schools. But yeah, I am wary that we've gone slightly over time, and I would like to go. And I would like to, if each panelist could give a comment to wrap up, that would be amazing. So if we start with you, Jonathan.
Sure. So I'll be quick. So I really enjoyed being part of this group tonight. I think it's been really good. One comment would be, let's keep this discussion going outside, and once we're out of lockdown, let's spread the discussion and get more people involved, because that's, from the sound of it, that's how we're going to get change. And we need the people who are going to be the change done to, making the decisions about that change. So let's continue this outside lockdown where we can all get together.
Agreed. And
unmute.
Can you hear me? Is someone on mute?
Yeah, can hear you.
Can hear you now.
Yeah, and can I get a comment from Constantine? Final words.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it would. I almost just wanted to do the sound of a bird song there. Birds have been impacted on Mornington Green. I'm almost just wanted to just do like a quick make my own little bird song, and then perhaps even the squirrel movement, because the squirrel movements were so important on Mornington Green Estate, and we're not seeing those now. I'm doing this in a light-hearted way, but it's obviously very serious as well. But yeah, I'm thinking keeping positive spirits in adversity is very important. Something we know very well as a community that had a lot thrown at us. But yes, just in community networking is very important, and just keeping positive. I think that keeping positive and carry on working together.
I can't follow the embodiment of animals that you've done, Constantine. I'm going to say something much more boring. I agree. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's try and make one new play street at least every year. Come on, we can do that, and turn at least one parking spot every year into a garden. Why not? Allotment numbers are going up. Let's try and do that. Start slow and then ramp it up. And I look forward to speaking to all of you after this lockdown, hopefully.
And one last final word from from Alexander, because I know that he's been part of the discussion.
Apart from Carnival going green, let's make the borough go green. That's all I have to say. Let's go green.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure speaking to everyone and having everyone in this as part of the conversation. I think it's the start of many conversations to come, and I can only see a way forwards collectively. So I just want to say thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Tayshaun.
Thank you. Yeah.
Tayshaun, can I ask you to plug? Can you plug tomorrow's event for us, please, and Saturdays?
And you can tune in tomorrow at 8 p.m. And it's Our Health and Wellbeing, Not Surviving but Thriving, hosted by Jacob himself. And on Friday, and for Saturday, our future children and young people. Yeah, stay tuned.
So we are inviting you today to join us in celebrating the power of our community to organise.
And now that the council has made a commitment that the library will remain a public asset and a library, this is a living testimony to the truth that collectively we can and do make a huge difference.
Come and join the Friends of North Kensington Library to celebrate a new phase in this historic building's life.
As one of the first public-built libraries, this library has always represented the energy and commitment of communities, organising to secure their future through self-education.
However, in recent years, the commitment of councils to this principle has been weakened by successive governments.
We all know it took the awful events of Grenfell Tower to put an end to plans that would have handed our library over to private interests.
But our diverse community here in North Kensington has a long and proud history
of standing up and resisting the onslaughts of developers.
When us friends of the library got together, the whole case looked absolutely hopeless.
And it continued to look hopeless for much of the campaign.
Still, we persisted.
Through the most difficult moments, when losing the library to private interests seemed like a fait accompli, the Friends of North Kensington Library came together.
We were endlessly supported by the many community groups and organisations that make up the network of self-supporting and community-led groups that have been so important to securing the future of public space in this area.
Even when they are in ways we cannot predict, could not hope for, or aren't able to perceive.